Greetings and salutations, this is Akirishin. In this video, I will be featuring the Russian Lavochkin La-160 fighter. This aircraft features two 30mm cannons, which have a high damage per second of 300, a medium rate of fire of 300 rounds per minute, and a mid to high effective firing range of 700 meters. As with all my fighters, I have equipped this aircraft with the Control Surface 4 consumable, which increases maneuverability in turns by 3%, as well as Lightweight Airframe 4, which increases maneuverability in all axes by 3%. This aircraft has low survivability, so I have chosen to equip it with improved covering, which decreases by 20% the chance of critical damage to wings and tail. It also increases the aircraft's hit points by 5%. In terms of ammunition, I have gone with the universal ammunition, which has a medium chance of fire and a better than average chance for critical damage. If you were going to go with a gold ammunition, I would certainly recommend the high explosive because it is a quote-unquote large caliber armament. High explosive is made for that with the very high crit chance provided by that ammunition. I have equipped it in terms of consumables with automatic fire extinguisher, as well as the first aid kit to get our pilot back into shape if our pilot is injured. Because as you may know, an injured pilot, it is very difficult to put rounds on the target. Your reticle gets big and you can't hit the broadside of a barn. Both of those consumables are activated automatically because they are gold consumables that I have chosen. If you went with the non-gold versions of those consumables, you would need to activate them manually. Also, the non-gold have a cooldown of 90 seconds, whereas the gold have cooldowns of 60 seconds. But mainly I pick the gold just because they activate automatically. I like to be able to focus on flying and shooting and awareness rather than having to push buttons. I've also gone with heavy-duty control surfaces, which significantly increases aircraft maneuverability in all axes for a period of 10 seconds. That's of course to help you in those close-in dogfights where you really need to have the maneuverability edge. This aircraft does have good maneuverability in rolls and turns, but not the best in horizontal turning. Also, good does not mean great. Therefore, are enhancements in the maneuverability department. And in that vein, in terms of pilot skills, I have gone with the Aerobatics Expert, increasing maneuverability in all axes by 2%, which is indicated to provide a significant advantage in close maneuvering combat. So that brings our maneuverability in all axes up to 5% with our other upgrade. I've also gone with Aerodynamics Expert because it increases by 40% the percentage effects provided by lightweight airframe as well as control surface adjustment. If you wanted to upgrade next, you could consider going with Protection Expert because it does enhance our third upgrade. So that can further beef up our survivability in this aircraft. Specifically, it improves the effects of improved covering 4. This aircraft is most effective in mid-altitude maneuvering combat. We'll talk in a moment about exactly what that means in terms of mid-altitude. It is slated to be a high airspeed aircraft with a good boost. Does have an 8-second boost. So let's look in the aircraft specifications and see exactly what they mean by those things. First of all, looking at the average turn or time to turn, 360 degrees, it's 9 seconds, which is fairly competitive with other aircraft. Optimum airspeed, or excuse me, optimum altitude is 1,600 meters, which I would say is definitely in the mid-altitude range. The higher altitudes would be, 2,200 meters, 2,800 meters, maybe even 1,800 meters. So very much a mid-altitude performer. In terms of optimum airspeed, that is 456 kilometers per hour. Certainly you will see examples of this aircraft going faster when we get into combat. So I would kind of describe that as a medium airspeed fighter. Not the worst and not the best, for sure. In terms of the cannons, what I will say is a definite feature is that they tend to overheat very quickly. I would say, and you'll see it when we get into combat, but you're probably going to get 4 to 5 bursts out of the cannons before they overheat, and then they're kind of slow to cool down. So that is, something that can be challenging with this aircraft. Just when you think you're about to finish off an enemy, your guns overheat and you're waiting for them to cool down. Feels like forever. And then a bot comes in and finishes off your target that was just hanging on by, within an inch of its survivability. So that can be a little frustrating. All right, in terms of paint schemes, you are currently looking at summer, which is, pretty sharp. This is winter, which is pretty boring, I would say. Pretty boring. Just by way of contrast, let me show you another paint scheme that, boy, I really wish this aircraft had. Look at that for winter. Why doesn't it have that? Wouldn't that be awesome? But no, it does not. It's just plain Jane gray. There you go. Blah. This is desert, which, folks, I don't even get this. What is that? Mauve? Pink? I'm not even sure what color that is. Hideous. I've got to say, it's hideous. And then finally we have marine, which looks pretty sharp. So, they could do a little better in the paint scheme department. But hey, it is what it is. All right, so what we're going to do now is head over to World of Warplanes website. And we're going to use their Compare Aircraft tool to take a look at this aircraft in comparison to other Tier 9 fighters. So let's do that now. All right, here we are on World of Warplanes website using their Compare Aircraft tool. As always, I will remind you, if you use this tool, to make sure that you go into the aircraft that you are comparing and fully customize each one of them to the highest extent so that you're putting each aircraft in its best light. Also, you want to choose your main aircraft that you're comparing against last so that it will go in the first slot. All right, so first we have the La-160 as compared to the Supermarine Attacker and the Tachikawa Kai 162I. As you can see, in terms of the armament used by these respective aircraft, the La-160 is 5 to 7 points better than the Attacker or the Kai 162. So the La-160 beats out both aircraft in the armament department. In terms of survivability, basically these aircraft are pretty much the same. They only have a 1-point difference. And you see that in the hit points, with the Kai 162 having the lowest in hit points. In terms of top speed at best altitude, so when these aircraft are in their prime altitude spot. So as you can see, the La-160 is inferior in that regard to the Supermarine Attacker by 40 kilometers per hour. And at the same time, it is superior to the Kai 162 also by 40 kilometers per hour. In terms of average time to turn 360 degrees, which is an incredibly important stat for fighters, set up here, the Attacker is slightly inferior to that of the La-160. However, the Kai 162 and the La-160 are pretty much the same. Which is very interesting because whenever I've seen the Kai 162, I've always fought against it. I've never flown it personally myself, but whenever I have fought against it, I have found it to be a very maneuverable aircraft to try to hit. Optimum airspeed is slightly higher for the Attacker, actually 121 kilometers per hour higher in the Attacker, and 24 kilometers per hour on the Kai 162I. And I can tell you, even though its stats say the La-160 has a high airspeed, it often doesn't feel that way. It feels kind of slow, and it feels like it takes forever to get up to objectives. In fact, you feel like you spend a lot of time just flying to get places than actually doing combat. Optimum altitude, the Attacker and the Kai 162 are both significantly higher altitude performers than the La-160. Rate of climb, again, the Attacker and the Kai 162I significantly faster than the La-160 in terms of rate of climb, the Attacker being more so than the Kai 162. I suppose that the Kai 162I does not have that big of a difference. It's only 1.2 meters per second, but the Attacker is 10 meters per second, and that can make a difference when you're in the La-160 and trying to escape that aircraft that's maybe on your tail. You're trying to get to safety. Probably not going to work against the Attacker. All right, moving on. We have the Vought F6U Pirate and the North American FJ1 Fury, which is an aircraft that I have enjoyed flying. The La-160 is beat out in the armament department by the F6U. Not surprisingly, it is listed as being superior to the FJ1. Now, what I will say about that is the FJ1 has those numerous machine guns. And in the very fast-paced world of these jet aircraft, things are happening very quickly. And the benefit of having those machine guns versus the cannons is, while the cannons may be on paper more powerful, you're going to hit a lot more with the FJ1 Fury's guns. And it's all about getting rounds on the target, you know. So that's something to keep in mind when you see that figure. In terms of hit points, the F6U and the FJ1 both higher hit points than the La-160, and consequently slightly higher survivability rating. Top speed at best altitude, the FJ1 and the La-160 are identical. The F6U 50 kilometers per hour faster than the La-160. Average time to turn 360 degrees. The La-160 beats out the F6U by 2.7 seconds. And surprisingly, also beats out the FJ1 Fury. Folks, that is a surprise to me. I've always thought the FJ1 Fury to be a pretty maneuverable aircraft, so I'm a little surprised to see it does not outclass the La-160 in that regard. Optimum airspeed, you will see that the F6U and the FJ1 both outclass the La-160 in that regard. However, the stall speeds for the F6U and the FJ1 are higher than those of the La-160, so that is one advantage the La-160 has over those two aircraft. Optimum altitude, the F6U and the FJ1 are both high climbers. The FJ1 in particular, 2,600 meters versus the 1,600 meters of the La-160. So, you know, honestly, given the choice between the La-160 and the FJ1, I'm going to choose the FJ1 because, number one, the machine guns, I'm going to get more rounds on the target in that fast-paced environment. Number two, if I need to go up to 2,600 meters to deal with a high threat or to get away or to get the, altitude advantage over the enemy, you can do that in the FJ1, whereas in the La-160, you'll be up in the red zone and losing control of your aircraft. So it's nice to have the versatility of the FJ1 versus that of the La-160. Just my personal opinion, but wanted to share that thought with you. In terms of rate of climb, the F6U is significantly slower in rate of climb than is the La-160, whereas the FJ1 slightly, not by much, but slightly superior to that of the La-160. All right, so let's clear those two aircraft out and move on to the Messerschmitt MEP 1092, one of my favorite aircraft, and the Focke-Wulf TA-183 Huckabee, also a great aircraft. Of course, between those two, I would say the P-1092 is probably more my favorite versus the TA-183, just because it's more maneuverable and I like the cannons better. All right, so armament-wise, both the P-1092 and the TA-183 are indicated to have better armaments than the La-160. And I can tell you, having flown both of those aircraft, I think they're better in the overheating department than the La-160, which, as I mentioned to you, is a problem for that aircraft. Just the cannon's overheating too much. Survivability, basically the same for these aircraft, slight differences, but nothing of particular note. You see that in the hit points. Top speed at best altitude, the P-1092 is overclassed there by the La-160, whereas the TA-183 is slightly better than the La-160. Maneuverability, average time to turn 360 degrees. So this is, getting in that round and round dogfight. Which one of you is going to come out ahead? Well, among these aircraft, the La-160 is in a losing proposition with the two German aircraft. So, if you get in that turning dogfight, they are going to get you, most likely, unless they make some sort of, error. Optimum airspeed, again, MEP 1092 and the TA 183 outclassing the La-160. Stall speed, the La-160 does have a lower stall speed than either of the German aircraft, so that is to the La-160's advantage. Optimum altitude, MEP 1092 and the TA 183, both high climbers, 2,500 meters. It's not, as high as the FJ1, but they're right up there almost. And rate of climb, the MEP 1092, slightly better than the La-160. The TA 183, somewhat inferior to the La-160. So among these aircraft, folks, if I were to choose, I would go with the MEP 1092. No question about it in my book. It's just a more versatile aircraft. And the more options you can have, the better. Its guns are better. I think you're going to get more rounds on the target with the P-1092 than you are the La-160. And finally here, we are looking at two other Russian fighters. So if you're looking, what Russian fighter tree branch do you want to spend your time with? We're going to look at that right now. All right, so in terms of gun armament, the Yak-19, slightly inferior to that of the La-160. The MiG, slightly superior. I would say, the Yak-19, I would probably take its guns over the La-160, just because of not as much overheating. Survivability, they're basically, these aircraft are pretty much the same. You see their hit points are all very similar. Slight differences, but nothing of particular note there. Top speed at best altitude, the Yak-19, about 40 kilometers per hour inferior to the La-160, whereas the MiG-9 about 40 kilometers superior. Average time to turn 360 degrees, the Yak-19 beats out the La-160 by 1 second. Actually, I thought it would be more than that. But hey, 1 second is the difference between winning and losing in that battle. It's really that close in that type of turning dogfight. And the MiG-9, of course, is slightly inferior in that regard. Optimum airspeed. The Yak-19 is a slower aircraft in general, I would say, than the La-160. The MiG-9 significantly faster than the La-160. But honestly, the MiG-9 is, it thrives up high. That's kind of its gig. Not that it can't fight lower, but its gig is really, you know, higher altitude fighting. So it needs that speed, got greater speed. Stall speed, Yak-19 and the La-160 the same. The La-160 superior in terms of stall speed over the MiG-9. Optimum altitude, the Yak-19 is pretty much that whole Yak line is pretty much a low altitude fighter, whereas the MiG is a high altitude fighter. And that is a limiting factor. You know, I really like the Yak line. I would say, you know, I don't have a problem choosing it as an aircraft. And I would say of these three aircraft, I would choose the Yak-19 over any of the other two. But you do have that limitation of altitude. You're not going to be climbing high with a Yak-19. You're going to have to wait for, you know, enemy assets to come down to you, and sometimes that can be a problem. Rate of climb, the Yak-19 is inferior in rate of climb to the La-160, not by a huge margin, but you know, enough. The MiG-9 is a much better climber than the La-160. So I guess the one thing I could summarize from what we've talked about here is that there are other aircraft I would choose over the La-160. You know, I hate to say it, if you're just a huge fan of the LA line, you know, I understand your angst in hearing me say that, but I would choose other aircraft. For me personally, I've been more effective in other aircraft, especially the Yak line. All right, so hopefully that gives you, you know, like I said, a better perspective of the La-160 as to where it fits in with other Tier 9 fighters. So let's move on from here. Hope that was helpful. So having reviewed this aircraft's specifications and my build for it, as well as compared it to other Tier 9 fighters, let's get into a battle now and see how it performs. We have drawn the Northern Bridgehead Atonement area of engagement.
Cover your allies, hit the enemy, and we shall win.
And we'll be heading over to the command center first, and then we will join our main body at the air base. We might also consider going over to this garrison. We'll just see how things are going after we finish with the command center. We have four human pilots on our team and 4 on the enemy team.
Let's roll.
So the La-160 has an 8-second engine boost, which is pretty reasonable for a fighter. I can tell you one of the main limitations I've noticed about this aircraft is that you're only going to get about 4 shots out of these cannons before they are totally overheated, and you have to let them cool down. Now, I do have to warn you that I am using hotel wireless internet here, so not the best for sure. Not the best of circumstances. Let's see if we can't. There we go. Alright, so I think what we'll do here is head over here to the garrison and see if we can't capture it. So yeah, you've got about, I would say, a 4-shot burst on these cannons, and then you need to let them cool down, rinse and repeat. So one of the things you can often do here is a lot of times these air defense aircraft will focus on the bombers when they come through their sector. And that, of course, is a good chance to take them out while they're focusing on the bombers. Come on. Jeez. Right? This guy should be dead. Okay. Let's see what else we need to do here. Got a couple of friendlies. Looking on those targets. More friendly out here. Alright, so we've got 2 sectors now. We're going to head over to the airfield. Get maybe about medium altitude, which is where this aircraft is at its best, and see what we can do. Let's see, what do we have coming over here? P-1056. Kind of low health. Let's see if we can't finish it off. If we can catch it. Doesn't look like we're going to catch it. Let our boost get back up here. Looks like he's probably going to come around. Well, I had hoped we might take him out before the collision, but that did not happen. So it is what it is. We'll take it. Okay. Incoming target here. Got some bombers up here. Let's see what we can do about helping out with these. Let's snuggle up here. See if we can get our fire to be a little bit more effective closer. One more. That it? Oh, no, we got another one. Take him out real quick and move on.
The threat to the complex eliminated.
Okay. Dealt with the bombers, and of course there's a whole other flight coming in. And it doesn't look like anybody else is on these, so we're going to need to deal with them. What is that? Kai 64, we're going to need to deal with that.
Support will be unable to reach you. Do you read me? Over.
Deal with him, and then we'll head over and work on these bombers. Okay, bombers.
The enemy has control of all key objects. You cannot leave it like that. We cannot support you any longer. The storm is too heavy. Do you copy?
Alright, so
The enemy is about to win. Push
let's see if
harder.
we can get over here and if we can.
Turn back. The enemy force is too strong.
Well, it's a defeat, but this aircraft performed pretty well. Number 1 rank. Our 2 chevron grade result. Looks like 14 aerial targets destroyed. Some of those, of course, were bombers. Which, you know, normally I don't like to focus on the bombers, but no one else was dealing with them, so somebody had to deal with them. As you can see, those bombers will chew your fighter up, but they have to be dealt with. That's the benefit of the command center, is either the bombers are going to bomb the heck out of your asset, or you're going to have to deal with them and they're going to chew you up in the process, especially if you're alone like we were. But still, you know, this aircraft held up through 2 bomber flights, so it was tough enough. Alright, so almost 8,000 in damage done to aerial targets, 14 aerial targets destroyed. We were destroyed once. Over 8,000 in combat points. So, pretty successful for this aircraft, albeit not necessarily, you know, for the team result. So the main limitation I see with this aircraft so far are the guns. You're going to get about 4 bursts off, and then they are overheated. And you know, they don't cool down very quickly, so you're out of commission there for a second. You saw that quite vividly on the bombers, how long we had to wait to get the guns back after just a 4-shot burst. So, you know, you definitely don't want to do bursts longer than 4 seconds unless, you know, the enemy aircraft is just hanging on by a thread and you just want to finish it off. Overall, a fairly reasonable maneuvering aircraft, I would say. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you fly this aircraft that you have great success in it.